Well, Scoggins is not here this morning.
No, he is out.
He's out doing his other job. He's working with the evangelism conference with training other pastors, which is kind of a big deal in what you do and what he does, you know, and in different ways. But you guys are constantly leaning into and training other pastors to do what you have been trained to do.
Yes.
And leaving that legacy behind. So I think that's really great that God's given both of you guys, you know, and again, in different areas, that ability to do that and that window to do that.
And it's such a passion with both of us. Both of us have received so much, and as a result of that, it's like Jesus said, freely you've received, freely give. And when you look at the community that we came out of, there's still such a great need for the training and the development. The dedication, the desire is there, but the development is so needed. Yeah,
that's really great.
Yeah.
Well, even without him, we're rolling on with Grace United, our Unfiltered, and you preached this past Sunday, and it was awesome. You know, I think everyone had it, and I didn't even tell you this beforehand, but I thought two parts of the service were really, really special to me. One was singing happy birthday to Mother Bridie. Like, I thought that was very, very special. But one of them was I sat right beside you in service, and I got to watch you worship on Sunday. And there was just a genuineness about your worship that blessed me. So I just want to let you know.
Thank you.
Because we always say that people are watching us, but you know, your genuineness of worship, you know, further released me in that and just blessed me. So you want to see your pastors love Jesus authentically,
yes.
and it's good to have those reminders. So I was just pleased to sit beside you then.
I believe that that's the atmosphere that is being born and birthed here at Grace United. It's a place of worship, but it's also a place that you're going to receive a word, regardless of which one of us are delivering the word. You're going to get an authentic, anointed word that is going to bless and build your life.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. We have 4 questions. The first one is kind of one that's kind of off the beaten path. And when they asked it, I didn't even know what they were asking, and so I had to look it up. So here's the question, and what I'm gonna do after that is read a couple of verses so that you guys understand. I didn't even understand what the question meant, and so once you do it, you understand it. So here's the question. It says, "Dear Grace United pastors, in Genesis 50:24, it says Joseph told his brothers, period. Does this mean literal brothers or figurative brothers?" So I'm like, what do you mean, literal or figurative? So here's what it says in Genesis chapter 50. It says, Joseph stayed in Egypt along with his father's family. He lived to 110 years old. And he saw the third generation of his children's children. So he saw his great grandchildren. And then he said something. He said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, you know, but here's what I want you to do with my remains." So I was like, okay, this makes sense. You know, he's 110 years old, and he's one of the youngest brothers, and so all of his brothers are 100, you know, so I think they're asking, you know, is this his actual literal brothers? Because he's so old, so they would be even older. Have they not died off, or figurative?
I believe they was his brothers. I like to keep it simple. Don't want to split hairs on it. I would just believe it was his brothers.
Right.
People lived longer back then, so yeah, I believe.
Well, and it doesn't say. We were talking about this beforehand. It doesn't say like all the other 11 of his brothers were there.
No, it just said brothers.
You know, so very well in this instance, and we're guessing. We're still guessing, but you know, 5 of his brothers may have died, and his 6 remaining brothers are there. So, but yeah, I think it makes sense in the context to say this is his brothers can mean something else in antiquity, but this makes sense in the context. Okay, number 2. I think this is kind of the one with the most meat to it. Joseph was put into slavery. We know all these things. He was put into slavery. He was thrown into prison. He was falsely accused, etc. And we know that God used all that.
Right.
But here's a good question. What are we supposed to do in the meantime? Are we supposed to just take it? Are we supposed to accept it? Are we supposed to fight back? Because Joseph went through a bunch of wrongs.
Yes.
So, God will use it, yes, in the end. What are we supposed to do in the meantime?
Yeah. I don't believe that Joseph was fighting. Joseph was in an unusual, uncomfortable situation, but he endured it. He lived through it. I know in our day and time, we look at slavery in a certain way.
Yeah.
But it was the way of life back then, and Joseph was put into slavery, but God was with him. He allowed him to endure those things and to come out of that. And coming out of that, I believe that Joseph walked in forgiveness. It doesn't tell us that he dealt with Sister Potiphar in any kind of way and got revenge on them. He didn't.
Right.
Even his brothers who put him into this situation, he forgave them. He walked in forgiveness and said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. Even went as far as to say that God sent me here.
Right.
It wasn't so much what you all did. You all were a part of the sovereign plan of God to get me here, because his purpose was not back in Canaan, but his purpose was in Egypt. And the only way that he was probably going to get to Egypt at that time was for that situation to happen.
That's good. And I think it's interesting, because I think the tension comes, and we even see it with Joseph, is we see, Joseph tried to get out of this situation.
Right.
He told the baker, he goes, hey, remember me, tell your buddy to get me out of prison. We see
2 more years went by.
We see when Job was innocent, he didn't want us stay in his Job.
No.
He wanted to get out of his situation,
yes.
right? And so, but I imagine that you would say that there are, so you don't have to just accept it and be there. You can try to get, that situation you're in, you should get out of it. But I think that there's a godly way of doing that, and there's also a level of trust while you're in it.
And going back to the message, the methods that Dr. King preached.
Right.
It wasn't violence against the violence, but it was nonviolence. So I'm sliding that in there as well, because there's still a godly way of doing things. Like you said, Joseph wanted to get out of it, but at the same time, it's kind of what I was saying Sunday, the ministry of prison really groomed Joseph for what he was going to do in the palace.
Right.
He continued to grow in his prophetic ministry. He continued to grow as a leader in prison. It wasn't an ideal situation, but I believe it groomed him for his ultimate job.
Well, we see, in this particular instance, we see Joseph. If you see in the very short verses that we have before he goes, he gets put it enslaved, is Joseph is kind of a young know-it-all punk.
Yes.
Right? And he comes out of all of his situations into this leadership role. He's a very different person after prison, after enslavement, after false accusation.
Transformation.
And that was the crucible in which God used him to, and you bring up Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend obviously went through enormous things. And that's why he could lead our nation from one place to another, because he was willing to be in that crucible. And so I think I think that there's that tension, and I think the question is not, you have these generalities, but when it comes to that, the specifics of, I'm in poverty, how do I fight my way out? I'm falsely accused, how do I fight my way out? I think staying in that godly position of love is a big deal. Here's a fun one. Number 3, there's only 4, so you're on the shook for. And Neil's not here, so it's going to be shorter. There's only 4, and Neil's not here. So, number 3, how do the pastors decide on who's going to preach on a given Sunday? How does our rotation work?
Yeah, what we've done this year, we've shifted to balance it out. We kind of shake it up a little bit, but all 3 of us are preaching the same amount of time. But we just kind of juggle the times to keep everyone guessing.
Yeah, we definitively don't want to let you know who's preaching. Really, because not you, but other people. Definitely not you, but other people. They will try to figure out who's going to preach on this, because inevitably everyone's going to have their favorite. Mm-hmm. It's just a very human thing. You're going to have your favorite, and you're going to have your least favorite, and you're gonna try to figure out when your favorite's there, and you're gonna figure out when your least favorite there, and you will decide whether. And we want to avoid all of those things because, quite frankly, it's ungodly. At least the reaction to it. And you're gonna have your favorite. That's not an issue. And so we want to allow. So even though we're preaching, it's not gonna go Bishop Neil Josh, Bishop Neil Josh, because then you would know. And so. Yeah, that's how we did it. If we don't like it, we'll change it. Number 4, and I think this one is a good one. After someone comes to know Jesus, like on Sunday, they put in parentheses, after someone comes to know Jesus like on Sunday, what should they do next? What are the next steps? What do you do? Yeah, I come to know Jesus. I've walked the aisle. I've said, yeah, I'm gonna give my life, heart, whatever to Jesus. What's the next step for someone?
Oh, wow. Good question. We're continuing to develop a process here, but let me put this out here. One of the things that I love doing, and that is discipling people. So if you know of someone, please feel free to get in touch with me, because I love discipling people and walking them through their steps as a new believer in Jesus Christ. Because I believe that what happens over the next, say for instance, a person who got saved Sunday, what will happen over the next 3 months to 6 months is going to be very pivotal as far as where they're going to be this time next year. They're either going to continue to grow, or they may end up declining, depending on what they expose themselves to, who they run with, what they're reading, what they're listening, what they're allowing to come into their system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the basics for a new Christian are the same basics for all, in which we promote here. So we have
small groups.
We want you to be in a small group, so you need to be in community with another believer. That's important from day 1 to day 4001. You need to be in daily Bible reading and prayer, and so we offer and we push, hey, come read the Bible with us. Let's meet together. Let's pray together. That's all. This is on our app. And then, Matthew 28 says that we are to make disciples and teach them to obey all the things they got. Not teach them to sit on the Sunday morning. And so I would say, if I'm sitting in someone, I would say you need to be in the Word, you need to be in a group, and you need to serve. You immediately need to serve the people around you, because that's the discipleship way of Jesus. As far as what to read, I know that in the past, Judd, who works with Young Life, what Young Life normally does is they say the first thing you need to read is through the Gospel of John. It's very accessible, and it's also very focused on belief. I say these things so you may know, so you may believe in Jesus Christ and follow him, right? End of the book of John. And so I would say if you're a new believer and you're like, what do I do the next day? I would say you need to read through the book of John. And probably the easiest way to do that is to go get the YouVersion app on your phone, because we're all app-based individuals at this point, and just walk through one of the plans there. So Bible, community, service, generally.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm glad to know that, I didn't realize that, but I recommend, as far as reading, the book of John first, St. John, and then James after that. Yeah, because to me, James is such a practical book of what everyday Christianity is all about.
Absolutely, and it gives you that practical, here's what to do. Because you want to, You want to do something with your faith. You
Yeah.
know, if you Genesis or 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. You know, if we don't actually put our faith into action, we are a resounding gong. We are nails on a chalkboard if we're not living out our faith. And so I would say from the very beginning, that's what we have to teach people to do, is to obey and to put their faith into action, because that's what real faith is, the book of James says. Well, there you go. And Neil's not here. It was a lot less funny than normal. But if Neil were here, he would tell you our address. So we're at 12900 Cantrell Road. We have 2 services, 9 and 10:30. Except on the fourth Sunday, it's at 10 o'clock, which you'll still get mixed up, I understand. And then we have small groups. We have things throughout the week. We have ladies groups, men's groups, Wednesday nights, all the things. There's somewhere for you to plug into.
Yeah, we really want to encourage everyone this coming Sunday, once again, 9 and 10:30. So come out and experience either one of those services. They really will bless your life. So come on out and be a part of what God is doing here at Grace United.
Absolutely. Bye, Cynthia.
Bye, Saint.